So for those of you that are just logging on or that are new, at about 5 after, we'll start. But Bruce and I have been meeting or talking a little while now about this carbon capturing and carbon sequestering potential around hemp. And so we're going to start hosting these on a regular basis. This is one. They're typically a Q&A format because we're really moving conversation along. There you go. Look at that. Drawdown review. Nice, Mike. But because we're typically, sorry, I got sidetracked. They're typically a Q&A format. Today, we're really going to use this to structure our future meetings as well. And so there'll be a little bit more discussion and really looking for opportunity if you guys know people or if you yourselves are experts in certain topics or really study and have research. I really encourage you to get involved, and I'd love to, I guess, bring you on to help be a guest speaker, right, Bruce?
Absolutely. Yep.
Okay, so during this time, if you guys would like, I'd love to hear from you on any wins that you have as we're waiting for people to get logged on. This is just kind of our lay low time, but if you guys have anything specific you'd like to share or anything that's happening, I'd love to hear from you. And Tracy and Bruce, both of you are welcome to jump in, of course, at any time. They're actually our stars today.
Yeah, I'll say a little bit here. I'm Tim White from Texas Healthy Homes in Central Texas. I've been involved in natural building for 20 plus years now, and went to my first infill hempcrete seminar down in the Woodlands in 2008. And so I've been familiar with the hempcrete system. Haven't really looked at it with a whole lot of detail until the last 3 or 4 years, because before then it wasn't even an option because everything came in from Europe. And I also have Bachelor of Arts degrees in field biology and in anthropology with an emphasis in archaeology. And so in the natural building field, I've done a lot of research on how clay material interacts to control humidity and temperature, and a lot of my own self-directed research on lime and pozzolan reactions, and are literally starting to recreate Roman concrete. And we're doing some field testing right now with some different types of hemp hurd that we're getting with that Roman concrete mix, not just for a binder for an infill, but we're actually going after a structural weight-bearing hempcrete building block.
I love it.
It's really cool.
Okay, well, people are logging on a lot. And so I'm sorry, I'm focused on clicking everybody as they're coming in. But Tim, thank you very much. And I would love to invite you guys to join any of our meetings that we have. This is one of a group that we host. I host 8 to 12 of these a month around different topics. And one is construction and building materials. So Tim, I would love to have you involved or get involved in discussion there as well. I will share links in the chat throughout the discussion today for those links as well, or for all of the meeting registration. And then Steve asked a really good question earlier, wondering about how to get on our mailing list. I will add each of you to the mailing list. We send out a weekly newsletter every week. It comes from MailChimp, so sometimes it ends up in our spam, so keep an eye out for that. But at any time, if it gets to be too much, sometimes weekly emails are a bit much, you can unsubscribe or change your subscription, your mail subscription. But inside that newsletter, it has links to all of our new members, any speakers, any discussions that we're hosting, any registration links, and so forth. We're going to wait just a few more minutes before we get started. People, like I said, are Joke's on me. I got muted for a minute. That we have quite a few people for the rest of the day. So I open this up now. Anybody else that's on, I would love to hear from you. If you had a good win, take 60 seconds to introduce yourself and share maybe who you are or what you have going, or highlight somebody else that you know that's got something great going on. Does anybody like to share anything?
My name's Les Simpson. I represent a company called Wellness Tech Plus. And actually, we're bringing in two technologies, one that increases blood flow, and the other one allows the cells to increase the absorption of nutrients. And so we're going to be working with CBD companies so they can use less CBD. And if it's THC, the person actually can have a higher high. And so we're going to be doing some research. In fact, if anybody here that have connections to that, these are proven devices out of Germany and so forth. It also it's FDA cleared to relieve pain through frequency. So I'd love to talk to anybody that has any interest in that. The other thing is it helps grow plants. And we're going to be doing some tests on growing hemp. And right now I'm working with Steve Essel, and we're going to be doing soybeans for him and see how it works with that. But it works for household, but we're taking it commercial.
Cool. Very cool. Okay. Couple more minutes before we get started, and then I'll do a quick intro. I feel like I repeat myself over and over again as people are logging on. So I try to give my big intro at the end, but would anybody else like to share maybe big wins? I see lots of you are logging on. Hello, welcome. Thank you very much for joining. Just take another minute. If anybody else last minute would like to highlight, I've got lots of great things happening that I want to share here in a minute, but if any of you would like to share anything, highlight anybody that's doing something great.
I'll give you a win. We're signing contracts to this next week for a house ground up in Central Texas. It's all going to be hempcrete with breezeway. And then we're talking with another developer who wants to do an eco village, and we're on their team, and we're slated for 10 to 15 hempcrete houses to build in the next couple of years.
Very cool. Thank you. I love hearing about progress and success. It's exciting.
Hey, Tim, this is Catherine. When you get a chance, I'm just trying to log in. I'm on remote and on my feet, but could you send me your email? I'd love to get in touch with you and learn more about your research.
Yeah, no problem, Catherine.
On the foundation. Thank you.
Yep.
Appreciate it.
Okay, well, welcome everybody. Thank you very much for joining. I'm going to keep logging people in as they come in or check in, but I wanted to real quick give an overview. For those of you that are new to any of our meetings or the Global Hemp Association, we host a number of these every month, focused on all different topics. My goal was to help bridge the gap and grow the industrial hemp industry and really educate around the real opportunities. There have been lots of people say, and I very much agree, I feel like the CBD market really hijacked the potential around the hemp industry. And so we're here to talk about a topic that's really brought up often in all of our meetings. And it's the carbon sequestering, or the value that we have for the carbon footprint around what hemp offers. And so I'm really excited to introduce Bruce. Bruce has quite the background and has been studying this for a really long time. Before I do that real quick, I want to remind everybody that you're on mute. When you're not talking, please keep yourself on mute. And then if you do want to talk, feel free to raise your hand or type questions in the chat. This is an open discussion. Our goal here is to really start conversation around the opportunity for carbon sequestering and hemp. There are a lot of extremely bright people on this call, and I'm extremely thankful for all of you joining. Bruce and I have been talking about this for a while now, and really our goal, like I said, is to start the discussion, as this is going to be an ongoing series. And so, Bruce, I'll turn it over to you for now, and then we can kind of all continue to let people in. And for all of you that have submitted questions, like I said, feel free to, for all of you that have submitted questions, we've looked over a lot of them. We'll get to some of them. There's 100, 200 questions that came in, which is really awesome. But if you would like to ask questions, raise your hand, leave them in the chat. I'll call on you and help drive the conversation. Bruce, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Mandy. Well, welcome everybody. Like Mandy was saying, we were discussing this a few weeks back, maybe a month ago, that with all these other topics that she's been doing such a great job on and getting a lot of people to come to, I thought maybe we should have something that talks about carbon specifically, both how carbon can be sequestered and avoided, and also carbon credits and this sort of thing, et cetera. So I will tell you all up front, and I am not a scientist. My nephew, however, does play a scientist on television. So I think I might be slightly qualified, but only slightly. Mandy gives me too much credit, quite frankly. I have studied the whole concept of how we go carbon negative for years, but I probably, how do you say that? I know less than I know less than I know. Something like that. I have much more to learn, but hopefully what we can do is, by having this first initial session, is to spark some folks talking about how we can get into this a little bit more in depth and be even more scientific about the whole process. So I've prepared a couple of slides to go through some things, and I can guarantee you that not everything here is going to be right. Okay, but at least it'll start that discussion process. So once again, thank you all for coming in, and please, if you have questions, please put them into the chat or click the chat raise your hand screen, or reactions, I guess it's called reactions. You can put a little hand up in your screen. So with that, I'll go ahead and start with this presentation. My name is Bruce Dietzen, and my background prior to getting involved with hemp was in the computer and the internet industry. And probably around 2013, I read somewhere online an excerpt from Jack Herer's book, The Emperor Wears No Clothes, a story about Henry Ford and how he had made a car that was sometimes called the plastic car, sometimes called the hemp car, or what have you. And he debuted it in 1941. And so I was just at the point where I was doing what every middle-aged man who's in a midlife crisis is doing in his 50s, designing his own sports car. Everybody has to do that at some point in their life if you're a guy, right? And so just at that point, I was about to make it out of fiberglass, and I read this story in The Emperor Wears No Clothes. And I had to try to do some rough back of the envelope calculations. And that's what started me into taking a look at the concept of hemp being carbon negative. And I'm sure my numbers were wrong, but at least they were somewhere in the ballpark. And the conclusion was because he made about half the volume of his car out of plant material. And then he fueled it from, at least allegedly, and then he fueled it from cellulosic ethanol from his hemp, from the scraps from his hemp fields, which kind of blew my mind too, that it was actually a very, very green car. And my rough calculations said it had a lifetime carbon footprint that would be less than five tons. So I don't know if that's right or not, but that's kind of what got me into it. And so I made a car, made two of them. Now I'm a little more focused, and we still will make cars for those folks that want one. They're going to be very expensive, however, but we can engage companies who have made cars before and they have molds and this sort of thing, and work with them to make just about any kind of car that's ever been, a reproduction or something like that, using hemp fiber instead of fiberglass. But that's not my main thing. I can do that stuff, but those cars would be very expensive, just because they're one-off type of things. But the thing I'm focused on right now is developing new fabrics that can be used for the same sort of application and making them lighter and stronger. Again, all 100% hemp fiber used in there. Then about 2 years ago, I was asked by the son of Jack Herer, Dan Herer, if I would help him republish The Emperor Wears No Clothes, which is still the number one selling book in history on the topic of hemp. And so we did that. We got that out there. And that was a real honor to have been involved in that. Jack is or was one of the first big proponents of making everything possible from hemp. And now lately, just over this last week, we've launched a small team of us so far, but quickly growing, an effort to pursue the Elon Musk's challenge, the X Prize Carbon Removal Challenge. And we'll talk about that towards the end. So some of you might have seen this the other day. Mandy put out this quick question. Because it was kind of bugging myself and her, that everybody seems all over the map about how much CO2 can be sequestered by hemp. And so asked that question. And Mandy, do you want to chime in here and just mention what the results look like? You got a second?
Yeah, I was just actually pulling them up to see if I could get the final results so far, but I think it's like 30% voted 20 and maybe 20% voted less than 1. And so we're pretty equal. Everybody else is, I think it's like 28%, 23%, whatever the number.
It was pretty much all over the board, right? And
yeah,
so one of the reasons for, doing that is just to kind of take a temperature and see what people, what they believe is right and what's not and this sort of thing. So again, begging the question, how do we get to the facts here, right? So I'm going to make an attempt at this, so I hope it's helpful. But we have this opportunity, as you guys know. It was 36 years ago, I believe, 36 years ago that Jack was saying that things like, I'm not saying hemp is going to save the world, but it's the only thing that can. He was pretty outspoken and pretty opinionated. That was a wild statement at the time. It's probably still a wild statement, but he threw down the gauntlet. Back in 1985. And so now we're in a situation where we're finally going to have to do some quantification in order to pursue this green new economy, this green new industrial revolution, where we're not just going to be trying to go carbon negative. I remember like 4 or 5 years ago, I thought, wow, if we could just be carbon neutral. I remember thinking, if we could just be carbon neutral, that would be so awesome. But now it's pretty obvious to everybody. We've got to go beyond being carbon neutral. We have to go carbon negative. We have to be taking CO2 out of the atmosphere. And hemp is a great product, potentially, to do that. So we want to dig in and try to figure out what the answer is and try to figure out how we can be successful by making everything possible from plants like hemp. And then recently, just not too long ago, of course, Elon Musk put this challenge out. And he is offering to award $100 million to the teams that have the best solutions for drawing down carbon out of the atmosphere. So now it's upon us, if we want to, as a hemp society, to pursue this. But it's going to take some serious work, some serious quantifications. Because one of the big things here that's required is that in order to win this X Prize, first prize is going to be $50 million. You have to be able to show very clearly that your solution is able to pull down a gigaton of CO2 in a year. And that's a big jump. That's a lot of CO2. So it's a challenge. Right now, the problem I think we have as an industry is that we don't really have a consensus on what the real numbers are for how much hemp can help us sequester or avoid CO2. As a result, you see charts like this with all these great solutions that have been proposed, and there are many more, I'm sure. But gosh, there really, really needed to be, one that says hemp, So that's the point I want to make with that slide. I need to minimize this screen so I can see what I'm doing here. Okay, that's better. So what we need to do, I would propose, is to build a consensus based on science, not conjecture, on how much CO2 hemp can sequester by making durable and recyclable goods. is number one. Number two is avoid, by replacing highly carbon positive materials like steel and cement and plastic, etc., with hemp materials. And three is to sequester CO2 into the soil. And we need to figure out exactly what the number or rough numbers are for each one of those three different categories. These are some examples here of the first number one issue that I was mentioning here, and that's how do we sequester CO2 by making durable and recyclable goods from hemp. On the left is our good friend Summerstar Haskey, who is her and her mother are the owners of Enviro Textiles out of Colorado, and where I bought a lot of my materials from, by the way, to make the car fast. And so this is an example. This car is the second car that I built with a hemp body. And the reason why I use this as an example is that I believe something like 27% of all steel that's made right now, my number could be wrong, is for the automotive industry. And interestingly enough, it's my understanding as well that the automotive industry pretty much demands virgin steel, not just the recycled stuff. That more goes into the construction industry, et cetera. But the auto industry requires virgin steel. And in order to make virgin steel right now, you pretty much have to burn a whole lot of fossil fuels in order to do that. To recycle steel, it's possible to do it with electricity. So right there, the automotive industry is pretty big. There's also the marine industry, boats, et cetera. I don't have them all listed here. Another great example, I think, is the whole concept of taking hempcrete to the next level, right? I've seen figures like 30% of all man-made greenhouse gases come from building, and 30-some% come from heating buildings, et cetera. But from all the different hempcrete buildings that have made so far around the world, most of them are only 1-story or 2-story. But what if we got to the point where we started to make 40-story tall buildings that were framed out with engineered lumber or bamboo or this sort of thing, and instead using the making the walls out of hempcrete? It's theoretically possible, and it could be a huge opportunity to avoid a lot of concrete, quite frankly, and also to sequester a lot of CO2 in that stuff. And this third example was kind of a wild example that Bob Escher and I were talking about maybe about 8 months ago. It's just a wild and crazy idea. Bob's with USHBA, and I was posing to him about this idea of space communities, and I told Bob, I said, we're not going to have to worry about this, of course, for decades. You and I won't be around by the time they do it. But it turns out, of course, that Jeff Bezos studied under a guy who came up with a concept that's called the O'Neill cylinder back in 1976 when he was at Princeton. And O'Neill had this idea that we would be having communities of 1 million people or more orbiting space in the future. And one of the things that O'Neill and Isaac Asimov never really talked about in the book that was written about it was that there are no fossil fuels in space. So how are you going to make all your steel? How are you going to make all your concrete, et cetera? It might make sense to consider a different material that you can actually grow, and make possibly a material that can really help you balance out the atmosphere too. So, and we were joking, we won't have to worry about that. Well, about a month ago, it was announced the company called OAC is going to have a hotel orbiting space in 2027. Is that wild or what? So there's some big opportunities, I think, coming down the pike to make things from recyclable and durable goods from hemp. I've got an objective here that I wanted to run through and kind of get some input back from the community here and see if this is a formula that everybody can kind of buy into. I think it's pretty solid, but we need a formula here to kind of base things around. And it starts with the simple concept that excluding water, plants are made primarily from CO2 removed from the atmosphere. the mass of a plant does not come from the soil. Very small amounts of nutrients come from the soil. The mass of the structure actually comes from CO2. Strangely enough, that is not common knowledge, but it happens to be true. And the next thing we need to understand, given that fact, is how much carbon dioxide is actually pulled out of the atmosphere in order to make the plant material. So the first thing we have to do is understand the atomic weight of CO2, and that's 44. It's 2 oxygen atoms bonded to a carbon atom, and each has its own weight. Oxygen's atomic weight of 16, and carbon is 12. Oops, too far. Now, if we want to take a look at how much, once that CO2 is sucked into the plant leaf, right? The plant starts doing its thing, breaking the CO2 apart and using it for whatever it has to do its thing with, right? So we also need to take a look here at the carbon that's left in that plant. And so that's 12. So we're going to divide 44 by 12, and that's going to give us this nice little number of 3.67. And that's what represents how much CO2 was pulled out of the atmosphere once we know the weight of the carbon that's in a plant. If that makes sense, right? So if you have a pound of CO2 from plant material in front of you, you know that required that plant to take 3.67 pounds of CO2 out of the atmosphere in order to make that carbon. So we know, however, that dried plants are not 100% carbon, but they are 45% carbon. Just like our bodies are somewhere around 20% carbon, plants are universally about 45% carbon if you dry them out. So we're going to multiply that 3.67 figure that we had before times 45%. And that gives us kind of a baseline figure about how much carbon, right, is going to be is going to be within this calculation. So 1 ton of dried hemp has temporarily removed 1.65 tons of CO2 from the atmosphere. Now, the reason why I say temporarily is that when you go online, you look on Facebook, etc., you see a lot of folks are saying, hemp can sequester, growing hemp can sequester this amount or that amount or this amount or that amount of CO2 out of the atmosphere. Well, that's generally true. But if you burn it or it's decomposed, that CO2 is going to return to the atmosphere. So it's not just a function of growing it, and it's not just a function of all of that CO2 that comes into the plant, gets pushed down into the soil. That's not the case either. We have to really take a look very closely at what happens with that material, primarily the stalks, because that's what can be used to make durable and recyclable goods. So the beauty of this, though, is once it's turned into a durable or recyclable good, right, that CO2 is sequestered, and you've accomplished quite a bit. Now, a plant, by the way, most of the carbon that's in a plant is in the bulk that's above the ground, and probably about 20% is typically in the soils. So, which brings us to the next question. What if the roots are left in the ground? Does that change the calculation? Well, if they are more or less 20% of the overall mass of the plant, as is suggested in this particular article, which, by the way, has a lot of the same references to the same numbers I just showed you, then what we're going to end up with is 20% more. So we take that 1.65 and we multiply it by 1.2. So it comes out, we've got roughly two tons of CO2 equivalent is in that hemp mass for every 1 ton that we use. So it's a 2-to-1 ratio, basically. Now, 1.98 tons of CO2 removed from the atmosphere when hemp is turned into a durable or recyclable material is the net result of this. Now, if we fact in a best case for scope 1 through 3 emissions of, say, 15%, and it's probably higher than that, but this is a number I didn't know what the exact number is, so I took a guess from an old study I'd read about cellulosic ethanol production. But I think it's probably more than this. So if we shave off 15%, we end up with about 1.68. So I think if you look around other folks that have tried to do these studies, that's probably kind of close to the range of what the consensus is like. So 1.68 tons of CO2 sequestered for every ton of hemp to make durable or recyclable goods. And so if we want to calculate just how much is going to be sequestered out of the atmosphere, we have to now apply how much bast and hurd, because those are the items that are going to be used mostly from the plant for making those goods. And according to Vote Hemp, and I think this is a very conservative number. Julie, I know you're in the audience, and you mentioned it last time I presented this out at NOCO, that it's probably a very conservative number, but that's okay. The more important thing is that we calculated the 1.68 tons or something in that range there. And then if you folks all have different studies saying that the volumes are different, when grown in Wisconsin or Texas or what have you, that's all good. So we really need to get that understood. So, but if we take that assumption that Vote Hemp's average is fairly worth using, then we've got 1.68 times 3.24, and that comes out to a little bit over 5 tons of CO2 sequestered per acre. So getting back to that original question, how much gets sequestered in an acre of hemp, this starts to give us some feel. Now, this again could be conservative, and it does not take into account the possibility of growing 2 or 3 acres of 2 or 3 crops per year. That would certainly help change those numbers dramatically. So let me mention now here another thing called carbon avoidance, which I think is something that we need to pay some attention to, and may actually be the biggest number out there at the end of the day when we're talking about the potential benefit of hemp. I'll give you, this is just a list of some materials that I've investigated and what their embodied carbon is. What all that means, embodied carbon means, is how much CO2 is generated in the process of making these materials. Well, we have the 1.68 there for hemp in a negative fashion on the bottom, right? But on the other end of the continuum, we've got carbon fiber. And so much fossil fuels are used to make carbon fiber that it actually is you have, for every ton of carbon fiber that's made, you're dumping 20 tons of CO2 into the atmosphere. That's not in all cases, but it's in most cases. There are some manufacturers that are figuring out how to do very small quantities, by the way, with renewable energy. But the energy that's required for doing carbon fiber is unbelievable. And then you've got other things, and you come down to say things like steel and cement. Well, that might look like a little bump, right? Cement is a 1-to-1. For every ton that you make, you're going to dump a ton of CO2 in the atmosphere. And it kind of looks really small. But the wild thing about it is that the cement is, next to water, is the most used material in the world, construction material in the world. I mean, just the total amount of it is just incredible. So both steel and cement contribute somewhere around a total of about like 15% or somewhere around there of all man-made greenhouse gases. So the opportunity here is really to figure out how much of these materials can be replaced. How many of these materials can we avoid? And I'm not going to go into the too much detail into this. Just want to introduce this concept because it doesn't necessarily talk to the concept of sequestration, but it needs to be understood here that, say, if we can figure out how to replace, theoretically, a quarter of all concrete that's used right now, right? And I think that's potentially possible if we decided to make 40-story buildings out of hempcrete in all the homes around the world. And if that became an edict and we really declared war on the climate crisis, we could see a lot of cement not being used, and instead we would have these structures that we would be made with things like engineered lumber and CLT technology, etc., instead of steel and cement, and just using massive amounts of hempcrete, not in a load-bearing capacity, but in an insulated capacity for the critical laws. So, and that, 1/4 of that would, right there alone, if that much was replaced, was avoided. That's a gigaton right there, right? So, it's 47% of the United States use of cement is in the residential market. So I think that's a real possibility. And so this is something I think as a community we should really consider and take a look at those numbers closely. Now, sequestration into the soil. This is one that's really just totally just up in the air. Trying to get some answers to this. You're all probably very familiar with the whole concept of no-till farming and regenerative agriculture, et cetera. And there's a huge opportunity, right, to draw down a lot of CO2 by doing these measures. But is that where most of the sequestration is going to happen when it comes to hemp? And it depends upon who you talk to. Take a look at the one at the right here, the natural farmer. This guy wrote a really interesting article. He's a sharp guy. I looked at some of the other things that he's put his opinion on out there. It's a wide range of different things. But he starts off the article and saying, well, I'm not so sure that, the hemp plant can sequester anything, because I don't know of anything that's made from the hemp plant that can last for 100 years. And we're like, okay, we need to send him a message about hempcrete, right? But his conclusion at the end of having this theoretical discussion in his article that he wrote is that the soil from growing hemp on an annual basis will draw down 15 tons per acre. Wow, that's a lot. Now, switch over here and take a look at Michigan State University study. And they mention right in this article that an acre of industrial hemp, right? Corn will draw down something like 16 metric tons of CO2 in one crop, right? But they go on to mention that all of that drawdown pretty much goes away because the corn is eaten by humans or cows, and then the corn stover is burned or what have you, or turned into feed, etc. So it doesn't really sequester anything. So you read into the article a little bit further, and they basically say corn sequesters into the soil anywhere from 0.4 to 0.6 tons per acre. I'm going like, wow, that's a little different than 15 tons. Down at the bottom here, you see soils.org, and they have an article, and they basically say that no-till methodologies for regenerative farming will yield about 0.3 tons per acre. So my take on this is that we don't really know what the answer is, but I can't imagine corn or hemp being 30 times or more effective at sequestering CO2 into the soil than corn. I don't think it's reasonable. So only time will tell, and the testing has to be done. And from what little I know about that testing methodology, it costs like $2,000 a shot for somebody to come out to your farm before you plant and take a sample of the soil, drill it down, and pull out a sample, and then do another sample for another $1,000 or $2,000 after you finish with the harvest, and see what the difference is in the soil of organic matter that's now in your soil. So I suspect we're going to probably find that it's less than a ton. Hemp may work better than corn. It certainly has these nice deep roots that can go a couple meters down into the ground, but we'll have to see. And so I think just in general, it's best to use a conservative estimate for now. So in summary, more data is really required here for different things. First off, just tonnage yields for bass and herd from various different regions. And they have to be specific by varieties, right? So if it's grown for fiber, or it's grown for grain, or for both, or even for flour, although, I don't suspect that that's where we're going to get our biggest hit in terms of carbon sequestration, is growing it for flour. It's more of the densely planted hemp. But I'm sure folks that are growing for CBD would like to know what their carbon footprint is. So we probably should study that as well. The average number of crops per year per region is going to make a big difference. So we need more data on that. And lots of soil carbon testing before and after is going to be required. Investigation of how much CO2 can be sequestered or avoided by hemp subsector. So this is where the drawdown hemp concept came out of, right? There was a book that came out. I think the study started in 2014. It's called Drawdown, and it was on New York Times bestseller. And back in 2014, the guy who ran the whole operations, Paul Hawkins is his name, and he went out and he recruited all these different teams and scientists, et cetera, to propose what they thought would be the best way to draw down the CO2 in the atmosphere. And he came up with 83 different studies, right? And then he had them all kind of put the numbers into the same sort of format, right? So it could be understood by any lay people that would read the book. And then the book was awesome. In that book, by the way, they gave hemp an honorable mention. It was 2014, and hemp was still a Schedule 1 drug. So their conclusion was, we've heard about this hemp stuff, and it really has a lot of potential, but we didn't have a team. We didn't put a team together to study it in depth like all the other ones. So now the time has come for those various different teams. So what I'm proposing here is that we have a drawdown hemp team that has cement specialists, or I should say, not cement specialists, but hempcrete specialists, fuel specialists, hemp textile specialists, animal feed specialists. If we can start to use animal feed instead of other things that are being used, grains, etc., we use hemp instead. A meat substitute. There's something, when I did a rough calculation on this thing, if we stopped eating meat 100%, which isn't going to happen, and instead we ate hemp burgers, right? The impact was somewhere in the neighborhood of the avoidance. Again, getting back to avoidance, the CO2 avoidance would be measured somewhere in the neighborhood of about 1.5 gigatons per year. Wow, that's a big number. We've got biocomposites, which is an area that I'm specifically interested in. We've got plastic biochar batteries, and the list is probably going to go on for a ways. But that's the whole idea, is to have various experts all come together, and ultimately, what we would do is put these conclusions together, right? And then pose them to the X Prize committee as a unified proposal, with the potential to reduce, hopefully, gigatons of CO2 per year. By themselves, from the numbers I'm looking at, hempcrete looks really, really great. But if my numbers are anywhere close, if we built every single building that's going to be, every single home or apartment that's going to be built over the next 10 years, we wouldn't even come close to, if we built it all out of hempcrete, we wouldn't even come close. We'd have like 20% of a gigaton. So that's why it really requires a team of people working together. So in conclusion here, a conservative estimate on CO2 sequestered by an acre of hemp grown for fiber and turned into durable goods might be around 5.44 metric tons, using those stalks and turning them into durable and recyclable goods. And then additionally, we get a bump of about a half metric ton sequestered in the soil. So we're coming out with somewhere around 6 metric tons per acre. But the most important thing to take away from here is where we're getting our big hit is not, if I'm correct here, is not from sequestration into soil. Our big hit is making stuff out of hemp, durable goods out of hemp. And of course, according to the X Prize, those durable goods need to be able to be durable enough to last 100 years. And I think that's possible with hempcrete. And so let's see. Just put an open invitation to all of you. And if you know anybody as well that might be interested, you can join us on this team and see where it goes. Also, if you're interested in the book that I described here, The Emperor Wears No Clothes, for those of you that haven't read it yet, you may want to get a copy. And then if you're interested or have more questions or comments or constructive criticism, help me get my numbers better, I would appreciate that. My email is brucedietzen@yahoo.com. So with that, Andy?
I almost started talking with my mute on. Well, I know I've seen tons of comments and tons of chat come in. I don't know if Gus is on. Gus, I saw you provide a lot of information. I don't know if you'd be open. You're on mute, but I'd love to hear from you. I know that you have some feedback about numbers. I saw you drop some big numbers about acreage that we need per tons and so forth. So yeah, I'd love for you to introduce yourself and maybe share a little bit.
A professor at the University of Michigan. I have been working on this for 6 months. I'm part of the carbon sequestration team at the university. So we're like 25 faculty members, and I'm the one who specialized on hemp. So the idea is to use hemp as an intermediate, which has to be converted to other more stable forms, but this is probably the most efficient way to capture carbon from the air into a form that can then transform into something more stable. I have done these calculations based on a document that I shared, which is, as far as I know, the best study that has been put together in terms of how much biomass is produced from hemp when it's grown under different conditions and in different genetics. So I suggest you take a look at the document, because it's actually a multi-million-dollar, it's a huge study done by Australia. Nothing comes even close to that I've seen. So this is the best study. And if you do the calculations for hemp, you will need about 1.5 million square miles, which is about the size of the Arabian Peninsula. As I said, 1/6 of the Sahara Desert, or 10 times the total of the U.S. corn area. And the nice thing about cultivating in deserts is that you are not going to have to change much. You're not going to interfere with people. You're using underutilized land, but that requires new kinds of technology. So desalination technology, and there's all kinds of different issues associated with that. There's going to be a social issue, which is, I think, really important in the X Prize. And the idea is that if you start cultivating in deserts or in regions where there's very little water, generally you end up taking water away from the surrounding regions, which is where the indigenous people generally get displaced to. So all the native populations, oftentimes they get pushed into these badlands around desert areas. And those are going to be the ones that are going to be paying the price of carbon sequestration. So there's a big social issue, because people will tend to take fresh water from the vicinity, and that's going to lead to problems. So it's also going to be a social problem. It's not just going to be a technological problem. And And in the process, really, it's going to be a race against time. So if this actually plays out, hemp is going to play out, I think, regardless. It's a matter of whether we can get in there before big corporations get in there and create a mess that is bigger than the problem that we're trying to solve. So I think, there's a big social component to this whole carbon sequestration initiative that Elon Musk is, spearheading. But I mean, Elon Musk is only thinking about like 1,000 of what we will need to do. So when it actually plays out globally, I think there's a social problem that may be as big or bigger than all the tech and all the cultivation and transformation that's involved. So anyway, so that's what we're thinking about. That's what we're doing. And I could put some numbers together, but essentially you can also look at the numbers I've already posted there. So, you can base it off from the Australian field trials and then the acreage that I mentioned. And I think you should get at the ballpark. So it's
So I think there's lots of info, and I like this. This is where we open this up, or where I really open this up for this type of discussion, right? There's, as Bruce showed, there's a lot of differences in numbers. And so I'd like to bring some of the questions that we saw most. Julie, I know you're on. I would like to chat. A lot of the questions that came in are about carbon credits specifically. Like, how do we transact them? How do we track them? What does this look like? Julie, would you mind speaking a little bit about that? And I know we have something set up, just to put this out there before you get started. For the 24th, we're going to do a Q&A series at 2 p.m. on a Thursday. We do a weekly reoccurring Q&A. And so Julie will be here to speak specifically about the carbon credits as well. But if you want to introduce yourself and share a little bit about the carbon credits, that'd be awesome.
Sure. Thank you, Mandy. And thank you, Bruce. I love, you did make the point that, we all need to come at this market from different angles and look at it. So at Pan Exchange, we're the leading benchmark price provider across all aspects of hemp, from the cannabinoid market to fiber and hurd and grains, and an online trading platform. Our monthly reports focuses on the fundamentals, focusing on what's moving supply-wise, demand-wise, and why prices are moving, where there's bottlenecks and so forth. And that's the same kind of view we're taking with carbon. What to do today? How do you monetize the opportunity? And there's a few key issues. Bruce, I think what you were getting at that I have confirmed with one of these people who approve credits, thankfully. The important thing is, if you buy credits from a farmer who's earned and sold credits on his own because of carbon sequestration, and then you use that carbon to make bioplastics, that bioplastics manufacturer is indeed eligible as well for credits. It's not double counting, which is wonderful. So the voluntary carbon credit market today is messy and it's imperfect, but it's a step in the right direction. And if I may just offer a couple of observations, what we know here at Pan Exchange, to obtain carbon credits as a grower, it is messy, it is slow, it's expensive, and unfortunately a little bit difficult. So the key is, sorry to be the Debbie Downer, Mandy, I see your face. So
no, that wasn't for you. I'm sorry. That wasn't for you. I was reading another question that just came in and I'm like, oh, I don't know.
But the key here in the voluntary carbon market is to show that you've made a change for the better. It's about change, not just about hemp versus corn, right? You can get carbon credits in corn if you change your practice, if you add cover crops, if you diversify crop rotation, if you reduce or eliminate tillage or use less fertilizers, for example. Right now, I mean, the last, we could go on forever, and we're going on the 24th too. Here's the big thing that I'd love y'all to think about. it's not per farm, it's not per acre, it's per project. So there are registries that are internationally accepted with internationally accepted methodologies. Are they perfect? Probably not. But I think it makes the most sense to get together with other hemp farmers in your region that are practicing good farming practices as well as you are, and go in on it with them, because it's anywhere from $20,000 to $60,000 per study. So that's the big takeaway. Like, if we were to actually go about getting carbon credits, it's not overnight. So please start now.
Okay. I have all kinds of questions that will come up now that we'll address more on the 24th, because I'd say probably half of the questions, that's not true, maybe a quarter of the questions are all around carbon credits from today. So just everybody know that we are going to dive in and really provide opportunity to dig into this. So I've seen a lot of questions come in. I can start asking some of these, but do any of you have specific topics or things you would like to bring up or talk about? You can take your mute off. I'm happy to call on you or have you speak up, but I would like to start discussion or get discussion going around some of the questions and topics Bruce specifically asked or addressed.
Mandy?
Yes.
This is Dave Rockwood with Agritech Global. So we are already doing environmental impact monitoring for cement industry around the world. And what we do is we scan with satellite imaging every day to look at the impact that cement plant has on surrounding agriculture. Okay, we're measuring chlorophyll uptake. I don't want to get too technical, but so I participate in all of these cement industry webinars and trade shows. We have clients there, and it is amazing to me how people like Lafarge Holcim, Ash Grove, some of the Cemex, the world's largest producers of cement, are really working hard on trying to control their impact and carbon. But do you know what's not on their radar at all is hempcrete? Okay, so I'm trying to just say is we need more inroads with the big guys, okay? And they are driven because they're all stock exchange registered companies to showing that they are, moving towards that. But for me, I thought the biggest impact would be hempcrete. Not a single one of my top 10 global producers has hempcrete even on their radar.
Well, thanks. That's good feedback and good resource. Any other questions? I saw other questions. How big of a farm, and maybe Julie, you know this, but how big of a farm do you need to be eligible for carbon credits? And I know you had said it's per project.
Yeah, so it's there's no minimum requirement. It's just about math. So generally, people are assuming that credits are worth about $15 a credit. So one credit is 1 ton per acre sequestered. It's my personal belief that is going to more than double this year and quadruple in a couple of years. I mean, there's demand will outstrip supply. So it's really more the math of how much do you want to invest with this potential payout later that's not guaranteed, but most likely it's going to happen, and doing the math on that. And also, again, I want to emphasize there's no, like to Bruce's point, there's no magic number on how many credits per acre there are. It is, again, I want to emphasize, it's about your change in practices that sequester more carbon when you're talking about it at the farm level. So it also depends on the historical data you have. That affects price. It depends on how dense the crop is and machine harvesting. So there's no magic number, unfortunately.
Can I say something, Mandy?
Yeah, of course, Vinny, please.
I kind of fast read the document that Gus shared, and it is honestly a great document. The only thing that I didn't saw is that Julie are mentioning factors like the different change of agriculture practices you're going to be considering, because the issue is this. You can plant exactly the same genetics, do exactly the same thing that someone is doing, and you will not get the same amount of credits because you don't know if the other crop that you were planting before was a tilling or not tilling. You don't know if the other crop was using some amount of water or not. So it's about two factors. The document that got shared is amazing, but we need to take into consideration also the practice in agriculture that you're going to be doing. And of course, it's going to be taken, if I'm going to take the crop all the way to full maturation, I will not capture the same amount of CO2 in the soil that if I go before full maturation. And one thing that Julie hasn't mentioned, but maybe not directly, even though she says it's going to be a long time, just to get this, you have to choose the methodology and you have to choose the standards. And at least for gold standard will not even consider you if you don't have at least 4,000 acres. If there's farmers out there with 100 acres or 50 acres, they cannot, at least with gold standard, which is one of the biggest standards out there. You can use other ones like BCS or CAR, but you have to at least think about it's going to be between 16 to maybe 24 months in order to get the credits validated. One thing is what you think you can do. It doesn't matter. The document that Gus shared is amazing. It's extremely good. But I cannot say, look what Gus tell me, this is what I'm doing, so you have to give me the credits. You can't do that. The credits needs to be validated. And in order to do that, you have to start by first doing even though we know that we don't have to do a pre-factibility study, but we have to start with that one. And based on that one, you will choose the methodology and which standards. And then the key is, most important thing is, where are you going to be selling them? Are you going to be selling to the guys? In my case, we are going to try to processing the hemp fiber, the straw into different products. So we have three potential buyers. It could be the guys that are buying the material from me to build hempcrete. They might be buying the credits. I can go to platforms or traders, such as one that Julie represented, other ones out there like cooleffect.org or any other exchange that you can do that. At least Climate Action Reserve, they have a great platform with the Climate Forward that you can do that. So, but it is a lot of work. It's not something that you go to Home Depot and give me three sheets of carbon credits because this is going to take at least, I guess, 18 months, maybe up to 24 months to get your credits certified and validated.
Yes. Hi, this is Rudy Roma. Hi. One of the things that they're going to be doing they're going to be going back 10 years, and they're going to be taking a look at your insurance. They're going to be taking a look at a lot of the documentation to make sure that you are maintaining, because they're just not going to take just that 1 year. They're going to look back to make sure that you've sequestered some have good practices. And that's one of the key things. So thank you again. Another thing that Vinny had said about maturation, if you're going to go to post-harvest, or pre-harvest, because you want to get more of the silkier fibers, you're going to be, that's going to be at a certain date and timeline versus going to full maturity. There's going to be a lot of more carbon sequestering that could take place during those particular things. So it's very important to measurements are everything. It's the key to it all. Data.
So when we talk about measurements, I think that's something that we discuss often also, right? Is what does this look like, and what is that next step to move this conversation along? I look at the sequestering, the no-till ag or regenerative ag compared to traditional or strip row agriculture or harvesting compared to the horticulture, right? And so what are these methodologies or tools or resources that we have so far? And how do we pull those together? Bruce, do you have any questions?
Oh, this is Rudy Roma again. I'm actually building greenwave.io, which is going to be a data analytics for the industrial hemp industry. It's getting key data from the farmers to the processors, because each processor has its own input and throughput. And so people need to make sure that they have an understanding of each ingredient that's going to be coming out, because that is going to be what a potential customer is going to be needing. So having these data points, and then the processors, or the buyers, the ones who are going to be making these incredible products, are going to need their ingredients at a certain spec. So that's why it's so important. And logistics is another key thing.
Sure.
Making sure they maintain.
So when we talk, what is available now, Bruce? Where, or any of you that are studying this, Gus, any of you that are in this position now? No, I think one thing that I'd like to really make a topic specifically around moving forward is the standards and testing, right, around this specific topic. And I know we can get some of the other organizations involved, but Julie, do you have any feedback about what next steps we're taking, or what does it look like, for that piece of this discussion? Gus, I see your...
Take a really good look at the Australian document, because they did a really good job. Okay, so at least you should take it to that level if you want to be competitive. Otherwise, you're going to really be at a disadvantage relative to that document. So if you can put something better in relation to that document, then kudos. But that document is really well done. So it's quite solid. It's bulletproof,
Sure.
Really. So, yeah.
Do you have anything to add, Julie?
The Australians are always they're the most efficient wheat producer in the world. They're the most efficient sugar producer in the world. They're pretty avant-garde with regard to agriculture. So I believe what Gus is saying. I'm not quite sure I understand the question, but as far as how many credits we have today in hemp, is that what you're asking?
Next steps for testing, right? If we want to move this to the next step, where do we look at? And Bruce, maybe if you have feedback also, please, or anybody else. But as we move this discussion along, and there's a lot of input about, it's all over the board as to what we're able to sequester and how it's being sequestered. So where do we, what is the next step to move this along the both testing and standards to database like what Rudy is putting together? I know multiple people are doing the same.
All I would say, if I were a farmer that had the opportunity to either invest in studying how much carbon I could potentially sequester, or putting my stuff together, my data together, so that I can actually get the carbon credit, go for the credit. These things are gonna skyrocket in price, and so we know that hemp is leaps and bounds more carbon efficient than corn and soy, right? It is less than a ton in corn and soy. It is at least 5, some say up to 10, just for the sequestration piece. To your point, Bruce, lots of other opportunities still with the plant to gain more credits down the road. So I would be looking to partner up and to distribute the costs a little bit and get going on that.
Bruce, go ahead. And then I have another topic. I'd like to bring up our farming practices and as well.
On the topic of testing, Eric, are you still here? Are you on the call? Eric Osterman?
Eric?
Eric? Who? I'm sorry.
Oh, Eric Osterman.
Okay, sorry.
Anyway, Eric's the one who's told me what he knows, and he's with the Heartland operation up in Detroit, and he's their director of sustainability, and so he's all about testing. So, fortunately, I guess he's not here anymore.
Yeah, I don't see him on anymore. Darn it. So my next question or topic I wanted to bring up real quick is the till versus no till, and really bringing that to light. Is there anybody on that can speak to the carbon credit or the value to the no-till or regenerative agricultural practices compared to traditional?
Gus, what can you tell us?
Well, so let's see. I've been thinking more about farming in the desert, honestly. And, I think the reasons are pretty obvious, because there's no cost to the land and it's underutilized land. And what we need is, to focus on a single solution that will essentially allow us to concentrate all our efforts and then really advance things so we can meet the 10 gigaton carbon sequestration per year that we're shooting for in the year 2050. And the only way to do that is by concentrating all the resources into one area of focus, and that's really in the desert. So I haven't thought much about the local carbon sequestration problem in the context of hemp for reasons that I mentioned, because if you sell CBD, you're going to be selling around $10,000 per ton, in which case your carbon is only at best $100 per ton. So it's really a really small part in the equation. So unless you're really a socially conscious person like no other, I mean, you have to be like Jesus. You're not going to be paying any attention to carbon sequestration. You're just going to be paying attention to CBD. So
I would love, really quick, I don't mean to interrupt you, but I want Hannah, before Hannah, you have to jump off, to speak to this really quick about, she's been on and presented a couple of times, but has lots of experience. But I want to speak to her feedback around farming in the desert and pros and cons, or what you see as benefit, if you don't mind, Hannah. You're on mute.
Hi, everybody. I'm Hannah from Czech Republic. I do hemp farming like last 20 years, and we don't have any desert. So I have experience with farming on the field, and I think it's kind of working well because we just use the water from the rain, and we can do this kind of regenerative farming and be kind of very well competitive to the conventional farming, where we've seen better economy on the organic farming in Europe than on conventional, with hemp. So, and I think growing hemp, from my perspective as a farmer, growing hemp in the desert will be very, very kind of challenging, because I have friends who are from Israel that are trying to grow hemp there. They didn't succeed so far so well. Even with the medical cannabis, of course, that's another story, yeah. So I think hemp, it's really, as a plant, appreciate the sun and the rain and the organic fertilized soil, and it can maintain, it can even clean the kind of contaminated soil. And I think we should not miss the opportunity to use this plant as a good example for the regenerative farming. You need some transition plant that the farmers will really kind of understand. It's for some good, this is not only because they are pushed to grow crops, but they, in the competition of the yield, they have to use the pesticides and herbicides and all the chemicals, and grow conventionally, because organic in some crops is not so well paid, because it's just for feeding animals or whatever. So I think all the agriculture sector is kind of wrong, or our relation to the food and to the value of the nature. And I just don't think it's the best idea to start to work on hemp in desert. I think we have better things to do, and in the real cycles, in the respect of the ecosystems. If the desert is desert, I think let's regenerate what still we have left and take care about that by a good way. And don't let the conventional farming destroy our still eatable piece of land, So
I really quick want to put this out. We're already at an hour and 15 minutes. We still have 75 of you on this call. I'd like to continue to have this discussion, but the purpose of this today is really to get discussion going. And I really like that there are multiple sides and multiple points that are being addressed and brought up, because I think that they're very valid and why we're addressing them. So I'd like to offer you guys to continue to stay as long as you want. I will stay on as long as Bruce has time, or you guys have time. But I know Ahmed has another question. Before anybody else signs off, I'm going to give real quick a shout out. Our association, we're a membership-based organization. It's $75 a month or $750 a year. It gives you access to everything that we do, all of our content, our media, our production, our network, and so forth. So I would love to have you guys on. It helps support what we're doing, helps continue with education. So real last plug, I hate doing that. I know everybody else that gets on these is probably used to them. But with that being said, also, I really, really appreciate you guys coming. I will make sure that all of you who are registered today will get a copy of the video or the recording, as well as typed notes from today to each of our members. And so, Ahmed, I'll turn it over to you real quick and we can continue. Thank you.
Hi there. Thank you, Mandy. I had a couple quick comments. One of which is we're trying to figure out the carbon sequestered per land use of cultivation. And I put this data up there in the chat window about global land usage for cultivation. What sticks out to me is that, the livestock that we grow plants for feed is about 3.5 billion hectares globally. That's about 13.5 million square miles. And they're saying, well, the corn is about 100,000 square miles in the U.S. So and a lot of the corn we grow in the U.S. is actually to feed livestock. So right there, you have there's that whole movement of protein-based, plant protein-based foods. So if you could take hemp and make a plant protein-based food, I think that's an opportunity right there, because just far outstretching the amount of land uses globally is for livestock. So the other thing that I noted is that, there's a lot of talk about the concrete industry. And I posted up there that there's a company in Australia called Wagner. And Wagner is a public company now. They do very well. They make alkali activated cement. And they have, these whole I posted a link to a paper about bio-based cement that for a long time they've talked about decarbonizing the cement industry with alkali activated cement. So I was like, if you're making hempcrete, you should compare to that and look at that as a comp, because it's been very successful. That's all for right now.
Thank you. Thank you. And for those of you that missed it, we just did a biofuels discussion. It was awesome. I don't know if Terry is logged on today. I know he was going to be previously, but there are a lot of you on today. So instead of flipping through, I saw a couple of you also had, Derek, you're not on mute anymore. Did you have something you wanted to add really quick?
Well, so my company's International Hemp, and we have hundreds of thousands of pounds of certified hemp seed in the United States, ready to ship, ready to plant. We're going to be producing over 1 million pounds domestically next year, certified, AOSCA certified, U.S. produced seed. So one thing we're trying to do and moving very aggressively towards is to monetize the value of the carbon sequestration. I think we have a joke that we say, you can tell a farmer, but you can't tell a farmer much. And so I think some of these arguments about how we're going to change farming techniques and get guys not to no-till farm and to do these things. I mean, one, the minute they cultivate that property, they're gonna release the carbon. So I think the biggest thing to do here is trying to really create a crop that will permanently remove the carbon from the picture. And so what I'm looking to do is, this year or next, is to find someone, with the academic background that can put the metrics in place and say, all right, here's a variety that is industrially scaled up, that these guys can do 10,000, 20,000, 50,000 acres. Here it is. Here's your number. And then I can go to Pan Exchange or anyone else and say, okay, here's my metrics. Here's how we test it. Here's my number. Because then I can go to my farmers and say, look, grow, as long as we're selling off your fiber, you're going to get an extra $100 an acre. And again, for CBD guys, it may not seem like much, but for guys who grow corn and soy and it's a rotational crop, to put an extra $100 in their pocket, that's a big deal. That's a very big deal. That basically can get us their seed for free. So that could really blow open the market for the number of acreage. So for me, there's a couple things that and not to plug you can look us up. You can reach me at Derek@internationalhemp.com if somebody wants to email me. We're trying to find a couple things I think will really blow this open. One, we need to find the metrics that someone like Pan Exchange, that Julie can use, that says, okay, they're doing 10,000 acres. I now have 50,000 tons of carbon I can sell because these are the here's the variety. We've tested it. All we're going to require that they sell it. Here's how we're going to verify it. This is what we're going to do. The second thing we really need in the industry, as far as I can see, is an uptake of somebody, a real scaled uptake, either someone doing cementcrete that says, yeah, we need 50,000 acres. We want it to be at a number where, a Tyson Foods and Nestle and someone that wants to make a protein bar that really scales up the acreage. Because the acreage is out there. I mean, we have farmers that are like, yeah, I'll grow all you want. Where am I going to sell it? We got burned last year. People said they were going to buy it. They didn't buy it. I'm burning my fiber right now. Where am I going to place it? So that's a major focus that we're working at. So if there's anything tangible we walked out of this with that we really could sink our teeth into, it's how do we duplicate either we need something that the USDA, that Pan Exchange, that somebody will say, yeah, we will accept that standard of measurement. This presentation aside, this standard of measurement for every ton of hemp, this is what you get. How do we submit our varieties into that so that when I sell a certified variety of hemp, I can say, oh, and by the way, you get 4 tons of carbon with this variety. Here's how we proved it. And in fact, all you have to do is sign it over. We're going to sell it off, right? You don't even have to worry about selling it. We'll sell it for you. Sign right here. All you have to do is agree to sell off the fiber. That will open up. You're going to make it easy and make it transactional, and you'll have something here.
So
I have a question regarding the approach, and there's so many different aspects to hemp, but is the $100, let's say, per ton of carbon sequestered payback that someone is going to get, is it really going to offset the specific kind of variety that you need to plant to get to whatever product that you need to sell, whether it be hempcrete or graphene or grain or whatever, given that not every single cannabis genetics is going to be optimal for carbon capture. So how much are you really willing to give up on your own need? And are you really going to be investing the money properly if you're going to be thinking carbon capture? So, this is just a very general question. But
so an answer to that I can tell you is a lot of these large ag farmers are looking for a good rotational crop. You have 85 million acres of corn on average a year, 82 million acres of soy on average a year grown in the United States. So just rotational cropping through, you're going to get many, they want a crop that, frankly, they don't lose money on. And a lot of times they lose money on their rotational crops. So if you can show them that hemp's going to produce 1,500 pounds plus of protein, and you have a market at 50 cents a pound, 60 cents a pound, $900 is a very good yield for a farmer. They're going to net $300-400 on that acre. Now, if you add in, they can sell off a ton and a half of fiber at $150 a ton. There's another 200. Oh, and there's a carbon credit on top of that of another 100. That will beat the standard crop these guys grow on a normal basis all day long. A lot of them are only making a couple $100 an acre. If you're thinking $10,000 an acre, you're thinking CBD, you're not thinking large scale ag. That's not what these guys are. That's not the world they live in. These guys live in a world where they do 1,000 acres. And if they make $200-300 an acre, that's a pretty good year. So an extra $100 would make an enormous difference and get a lot of acreage under cultivation. So yeah, and it's not $100 if But $15 to $20 a ton, capturing 5 tons, that would be the extra 100. If they're not, I'm not even talking about selling it at $100 a ton. I'm talking about at $15 or $20 a ton. You will move the needle with these large scale ag farmers, that they will see a real difference in their body. Because again, it may increase their yield by 30, 35%.
Yeah, that's not even included in the crop itself.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So to me, it's a multifaceted, and I didn't mean to try to jump in. And I'm just saying that for me, I come from a background not in ag but in business, and for me, it's a bottom line number. How do we, you want to get businesses to stop using carbon, cap and trade, put a financial penalty or put a financial benefit. You want farmers to grow hemp and sequester carbon, show them how they're going to make money doing it. And so for me, it's how do we develop the metrics to measure it, quantify it, and sell it? How do we get Julie what she needs to sell 50,000 tons of carbon next year on her exchange? How do we do it? Who says I will duplicate the Australian? But Julie says, yep, we can sell that. If you give me that metric, I can sell it. Or I need what the testing they did over in Europe. This is how you need to test it. But for me, it really has to be in the biomass, because this, I can appreciate the green, different farming techniques, but you're large scale farmers. I've talked to a lot of them. They're not going to do it. They're not going to do it, to make an extra $8 an acre, to capture 1 ton. They capture 5 tons and they don't really have to change their techniques. That's great. And if it rotates in and they make money, but if you think of how much they have invested in an acre, $600, you're going to pay them an extra 10. It's not worth it for them to risk what they're growing. Mm-hmm. I don't think. I think there's a lot of pushback.
I've had a lot of pushback on big scale.
Yeah, they're not going to let the liberals tell them how to farm their field. They're just not. And so
I think it's real when we talk about moving the needle, right? Is where are we really at versus where do we want to be, and being realistic about what changes are going to be made. So I really appreciate the feedback. And like I said, I have heard a lot of pushback. Thanks for contributing, Derek. I appreciate that. Daniel, I saw you have your hand raised or a question. I feel like
yeah. Thank you. Is it sound clear? Excellent conversation. I appreciate that this conversation is happening. I'm joining from Spain. One question, and I think it's very impressive. The whole comparative analysis and life cycle analysis, both on capturing and avoidance. One gap that I think I definitely miss is comparative with the timber industry. Especially if we're talking about hempcrete, which at the end is just cellulose. So it's just in the whole analysis, I didn't hear anything about timber. And definitely from the product itself, it is cellulose. So which one is more competitive? That's directly itself. And then in the chat, a couple of times I read the whole mycelium, a potential for soil capturing, which obviously I would link it more to the timber industry than to the agriculture to the hemp industry. Meaning that if we are able to source hemp from agriculture, then some of the forest could be managed and used differently, because we already have sources of cellulose, and the forest can be definitely soil capturing solutions to mycelium, because at the end the amount of mycelium that you can build on forest is way bigger than what you can have in even in hemp, especially with the comment that we're hearing that the conversion into non-tilling practices and so on and so forth is a challenging one. I'm coming from that. I'm bringing that perspective and trying to root it in the very specific context of where I am, which is north of the And just to give a little bit of a context, as the other example was from Australia, aside from Australia, Spain and Portugal together are the largest producers of eucalyptus. We produce almost as much eucalyptus as Australia. And for us, they're looking at hemp and trying to bring it here and plug it here in the different industries, and having this kind of conversations. Definitely, the question of eucalyptus and the forestry is a big one. And so overall, I don't know if someone can make some comments on that, because I think that is something that is missing, that I missed from the very exhaustive analysis. And the other one would be bricks, also as a comparative analysis, which is a good technology. This is very, but these two, I don't know if someone can make any comments on those things.
Bruce?
Thank you.
Thank you, Daniel.
Yes, thank you, Daniel. Yeah, let me take a shot at answering it. I don't know if it'll be right, but the first question I think you were talking about was trees versus hemp, and goes back to, again, the book, Jack Ayer's book, where he dug up that study 1914 showing that hemp, and this was a USDA publication called Bulletin 404, hemp grows biomass 4.01 times faster than trees. Now, if you think about what I was posing here, the opportunity to sequester CO2 into soil at a half a ton per acre versus the opportunity to sequester CO2 into durable goods, right? That's a 10 times difference. So right away, in my mind, I'm going like, yeah, soil sequestration is probably a good idea, but doggone it, I want to build things out of hemp because it's going to sequester CO2 10 times faster, right? So if I were a manufacturer, I want to get that credit. Some of it can go to the farmer, but there should be 10 times more money floating around for that. There's 10 times more benefit. So if you grow trees, right, they take too long to mature. If you grow hemp, you can be harvesting it very quickly. So that's one answer. The second one was, you're talking about mycelium, which is really a fascinating topic, and I just was starting to understand this a little bit better. There's this whole thing that happens with plants that I think has only recently been understood since the 1990s, and that's that sugars and pectins are exuded by the roots of all plants, and like 85% of them are capable of growing these communities of mycelium underneath the ground. If you take a look at one handful of really healthy soil, there are more organisms in that really healthy soil filled with mycelium and all the bacteria, etc. There are more organisms in that one handful of soil than there are humans on the planet. So, yeah, it's a fascinating space there to look into, and I suspect you're right. If it's a forest and nobody's ever cutting anything down, then you've always got something live going on, and you have a really healthy soil environment. So you're probably going to be better off, in terms of that growing that subsoil or that community in the soil in a forest than you are with agriculture. But we need to make things. I guess one of the points of my presentation is that the best way that we're going to address the climate crisis is to make a bunch of stuff out of hemp. And we could do it with wood, but we got to do it now. So we can't wait around for a tree to mature for 10 years. So
cool.
My 2 cents.
Well, thank you. Thank you. Anybody else have anything that they would like to add before I move on? Another question?
Hello. I just wanted to touch back on what Gus was talking about, that the huge corporations are looking into this big business and how we can stop them. And so what we are doing at I'm a founder of the Green Revolution Foundation from Amsterdam. And we are designing a climate action coffee shop here, a legal cannabis coffee shop, where all our profits are going to fund climate art and climate action projects all around the globe. And also we are designing a mobile app to capture CO2 with cryptocurrencies connected to industrial hemp. So we want to create this demand, because I think when we talk about these products that we can make from hemp, the customers are important. So we are creating the demand and we are creating this movement. So I just wanted to say this because I think it's important.
Thank you. Abner, your turn. You're on mute, sir. Perfect.
Yeah. Hey, everybody. My name's Abner Johnson. I'm with a company called Pure Shenandoah, or we used to be called Shenandoah Valley Hemp. We're based out of Virginia. Anna, I know, I can hear you know what I'm talking about. We just bought about like 700 acres of seed that we have here in Virginia. And we have, I don't know, right around 450, 500 acres, more or less contracted out. Now we also have, we've been growing hemp for a couple of years now. We were in the CBD business. We have a CO2 extractor. We have a full line of products, and we do white labeling services. So that's like keeping us afloat. But we're now starting to get into the fiber and herd side of things. We have ODU, JMU, UVA, and Virginia Tech have been talking to us a little bit. But essentially, I'm trying to figure out what data I need to track this year with these. I think we have 30 partner farms who are going to be working with us. I really want to make sure that we're tracking the right data. Of course, soil samples have been done on every plot already, but I want to know what more data I need to collect to get this carbon credit down the line, verified with everything in line. So I guess that's kind of my question, or what are the bigger things that I need to be tracking? How do I make sure I don't just, waste this year with all these farmers trying to do their best?
So on carbon credits, and correct me if I'm wrong, but join us on the 24th and let's dive into that specifically.
Okay.
Because she'll be able to answer a lot of those questions. I do encourage you guys to take this opportunity and connect with each other off of this meeting. The goal is to bring you guys together and really start these discussions as we move forward. We will be hosting another carbon meeting reoccurring every month. It'll be the first Tuesday of every month moving forward. The link you used to register today is the same link that you'll use for every meeting moving forward, or for every carbon meeting moving forward. So it's reoccurring. We can add dates, move it around, but on that link, there's a drop down for you to select the date to register for. So the next one will show up. Bruce, do you have anything else you want to add, or where we want to kind of guide the conversation moving forward? We're at an hour and a half now. I want to thank you guys all for staying on. It's exciting. But Bruce, do you have anything else?
Well, just want to, again, thank you, Mandy. It's not easy pulling everybody together in this hemp industry. There are a lot of disparate interests, et cetera, and everybody's busy. But you do a great job. You always do. Thank you very much. And I just want to, on behalf of the Drawdown Hemp team, convey an open invitation to anyone that's interested in joining this effort. I think it's going to be fun. And who knows, we may even win the doggone thing. And who can't use an extra $50 million?
Well, I can find a way to spend it for you if you can't. If you don't want it, I'll take it for you. I'll take your portion of it. But anything else? Any other topics that maybe we would like to address, or that I can add to the calendar, maybe for the next meeting, for the next discussion? Anything else? Okay, well, I'll leave you guys with a few other dates. Let me look at before I spew out the wrong dates here. Our next upcoming meeting is on Friday. It's a textile meeting. It's 1:00 also. I will drop the link here really quick for you guys to register. But we have an awesome panel discussion. Amy Williams from Montana State University, Eric Henry, and Guy Coleman will all be there discussing the textile and fiber. So feel free to join, feel free to register, share. I really appreciate what you guys are doing as far as inviting and getting people involved in discussion. So again, I open it up for any comments, questions, anything we want to talk about at our next meeting. Again, I'd like to get a little bit focused around carbon. Hannah, I saw your mute come off.
Yeah. No, I think like it'll be great to just like start to work on the standards, like I think it's like just like the next step, we kind of like new industry, we need to get standardized, then we kind of and everybody understands like what we kind of presenting, how we want to work, how we count, So I think it's important to focus on that. And with the Hemp the Climate, this is the organization in Europe which trying to help like count the exact like process on the field this year. We saw with some hemp in Spain, and we work with some like people who kind of like scientists like on like carbon sequestration. So interesting team. So there will be some results hopefully like after the season. No, I don't know how many seasons needs to be counted to really get some real numbers. I think it's really process, yeah. So we are on the beginning, but like we need to really start and like connect, which is great. Thank you for Monday, like for this call. It's amazing. It's important platform. Thank you.
Thanks for joining, Hannah. Anything else, you guys, before we call it? I'll stay on here all I do is talk about that. Jeremy, I saw your mic.
Yeah. So I think for me, like I'm with the Green Revolution Foundation as well, and we're actually trying to reach out to a bunch of people all over the world for these carbon capturing opportunities. You're really trying to get hemp involved in other communities to really help boost the ecosystems and the cultures that they're going to be in. I think for me, I think I'm going down the wrong path after listening to this conversation, because I've been asking, like, what's your soil quality? How is it degraded over time? Like, and really focusing on how hemp can benefit that part of the soil rather than the actual carbon capture side. So I think my question maybe for next time would be, how are people doing, how are they collecting that information? Is there a better way that we can do it? Is there an efficient way that we can scale it so that if I send it to a rural community in Ghana or Nepal or somewhere, that it's not going to cost, hundreds of dollars for me to send them just something to collect a sample for them to send back to me so we can get the data. Like, I think that would be something really beneficial to start thinking about global scalability of how do we make this something that goes beyond just one farm or another to really make it, how can my farm test and I can get my neighbor's farm and we can collect the data together. So for me, that's something where, again, hearing this, I'm like, wow, I was really not off base, but I'm losing sight of some of the opportunities that exist with this. So it was really great. And thank you everybody for all of your input.
Awesome. Thank you. Daniel,
Maybe choose sense on topics or something that I'm still missing, or I think that could have potential. And when we think about CO2, as Hannah was saying, we're missing the standardization element, which is an important area of focus. And then it is the whole accountability element. Is okay, you're accounting, and from that perspective, the big accounting companies, the EYs, Deloitte, PricewaterhouseCoopers, those are people that I haven't seen very much involved in the whole discussion. I think that those would be people to involve, because there are many different initiatives that are happening, very valuable initiatives. But these big firms, they have interest in also creating this kind of accounting systems and the networks. They have the relationship, and I'm surprised that. They are not sufficiently involved. I mean, just as a general idea, but they know about creating markets, accounting, and standards. From that perspective, the standards at the end is how you count, how you do this, the stock counting. And I guess that just maybe a random thought I see the feasibility, the use of technologies that are standardized, and from that perspective, the whole potential of using aerial equipment that can infer from aerial views that is drones that are not that expensive, and that from aerial views can infer the amount of mass that is in those crops. I think that could be a technological pathway that could be standardized and then accounted. So those two general ideas. So technologies for accounting, standardized technology for accounting, for this kind of accounting, and then the involvement of companies, big companies that have a legacy on creating markets and accounting, which are like the big fours. I just in case it may be useful, these group of ideas.
I had last year I did a stint about 9 months with an individual that oversees 10 states of large agriculture, because we were looking for, and because he does, for Tyson Foods, big ag for soybeans and corn. And we were looking for those solutions for big ag, for carbon sequestering, or the alternative, rotation crops, very important. So these are the data points that we were able to ascertain. So, to help, the industry as a whole. So reach out, love to talk to you about what we're doing with this. And Mandy, you are incredible. You're incredible. Thank you so much for everything you're doing.
Thanks. Bruce, I saw your mic came off for a second, and I saw a couple of others. Robert, your picture is on. I don't know if you would like to say anything as well, but Bruce, go ahead.
Yeah, I don't mean to beat a dead horse here, but it seems to me that it would be absolutely fabulous to have some of these giant accounting firms to seriously take a look at the opportunity here. You've got to get some trusted big accounting firms to come out and say, yeah, this is important. Because what's happening is that, things like soil sequestration and no-till is something that's such a broad and wide concept. And you don't have to necessarily change the way you're doing things. You can keep on growing what you grow potentially, right? Maybe not, but you're just all of a sudden they're just on a broad scale. They're just saying, wow, you can make some extra dollars if you just embrace these new ideas. And so the soil is what's going to take all this CO2 down from the atmosphere. But if if the numbers that I posed were anywhere close, you're taking down 10 times more carbon into the plant itself that's above the ground, as long as you turn it into a durable good. So that's a whole revolution, right? It's a whole different way to take a look at the thing. I don't want to say this, but why would anybody even care about sequestering the CO2 into the soil if you can sequester 10 times more and get 10 times more credits? And address the problem that we have as a climate crisis 10 times faster, right? So I think the gentleman made a great point. We do need to have some big accounting firms come into here and say, you know what? We've never really thought about making all of that stock material into all the buildings that are around us. We've never thought about that. We just spent a lot of our time thinking about this standard thing that everybody does, and that's whether they till or they don't till. So I think it's a different way of thinking for some of these folks, and I think we got to educate them and say, this is where the opportunity is. This is where the big sequestration opportunity is. It's much bigger than soil. We got to do soil, but we got to take a look at something that's potentially 10 times bigger and embrace it fast on a big, big, big scale.
Sure.
So
there's a couple others that I saw pop on that I'd love to hear from. Jerome, I'd love to hear from you as well. I saw your camera come on, and then Robert. I don't know if Robert, you have a chance real quick, and then Jerome.
Okay, cool. Thanks, Mandy. Hi, everyone. So I was wondering, going off what Bruce was saying, that basically the goal is to make everything out of hemp as possible. I was wondering if there's any studies being done on which are the best products to focus on and making out of hemp, right? Versus like hempcrete versus clothing versus food. Which of these product categories are going to sequester the most amount of carbon? So I was wondering if any studies out there, any data on that.
Yeah, great question. That's exactly what Drawdown Hemp's focus is to study the various different ways that hemp can make an impact. And one of the very first ones is actually making things, durable and recyclable goods out of hemp. That's one of the very first, very simple, straightforward ways that happen to align perfectly with what the XPRIZE organization has posed as the challenges. How do we draw down that CO2 and then sequester it? And so hemp being turned into something like hempcrete is a big way to do that. But so that's one, some sort of steel replacement, like car bodies, etc. Fiberglass replacement, it's another one. But hempcrete is, I would say, that's probably one of the biggest ones for the actual storage of the hemp's, carbon. But then there's other things that we need to study too, right? Because XPRIZE did not exactly come out and say any way that you can help save the planet would be great, right? They came out and said, what's your technology that's going to be used that's going to draw down this CO2 out of the atmosphere? That's what their objective is. And I'm hoping for the day when I sit across from Elon Musk and say, how come you didn't say, why didn't you include carbon avoidance in your model for this XPRIZE competition? And he might say, well, I didn't think about it. And I'd say, you ever heard of Tesla, Mr. Musk? Have you, those electric cars, those are carbon avoidance tools, right? They avoid burning gasoline because they're electric. Oh, yeah. Should have put avoidance in there too. So to answer your question, I think hempcrete is probably the big one. Some steel. Textiles are going to be part of it, but the shirt that I'm wearing, right, is hemp. Is it going to last 100 years? I don't know. But it can be recycled, right? And that's how rag paper, that's where the original paper came from. The term rag paper was made out of hemp, recycled clothes. So there's not an infinite number of things that can be made out of hemp, but that's why we're taking a look at not just what can be made out of hemp, but also what can be avoided by using hemp instead of these other types of materials. So that's why I broke it into 3 different measures there.
Okay, I'm really excited for Jerome. Can you introduce yourself and share a little bit about what your interest is here?
Sure. Thank you, Mandy. Can you hear me?
Yes, great.
And Bruce, it's a pleasure to listen to you. I'm in the automotive industry right now, and so I know a lot of the stories of Henry Ford and all his tests that he did with hemp back in the day. And I'm a farmer on the side. I do bees, and have for a few years now, and I'm getting into the hemp. What most excites me, I'm more specific. I want to create rope for the boating industry. I'm not veering left, I'm not veering right. That's what I want to do. And so that's what I'm working on. I'm also very curious of your process that you use to take the hemp and create the bodies that you've done. I'm very, very interested in your process, first of procuring what fibers are being used in some of your products, because I've seen some of the experiments that Henry Ford has done in the past, and the durability of those body panels is actually quite remarkable. I also have the interest in some of those applications as far as aviation, hemp drones, and used for different applications of. And so, with that said, I'm a student here, so I'm listening to everybody, and I'm taking it in, because I don't want to act as if I'm an expert in anything. I'm very familiar with the cannabis plant, more on the marijuana side, but now in the hemp side, and I am doing some R&D myself this season with my license here in Michigan, and we'll be growing a variety that's out of Colorado. It's called a Canaf, which is a hemp hibiscus strain that's supposedly good for fiber, because that's what I'm focused on specifically. And so I'm really curious about your process and what you're doing, because there's a huge shift in the automotive industry that's occurring right now. A lot of stuff in the background I'm probably not supposed to be talking about. But with that said, I think you guys are on the right path. And so this is certainly a knowledge base and group I want to get to know more and learn from. And so I'm grateful to be here. So to listen to everyone talk.
Well, thank you. Thank you for joining.
Jerome, I would probably talk your ear off. So if you'd like to, I'd be happy to spend as much time as you like. If you want to just give me a shout, we can talk. Because Henry Ford's my man. I mean, everything that he's done, well, not everything. He was a terrible anti-Semite. But he was. I mean, he was ridiculously bad. He was just some of the stuff. But I think that car that he created was probably his greatest invention, in my opinion. And I can tell you all the reasons why later, if you want.
Absolutely. I'll be reaching out. Thank you very much, Bruce.
Well, and for those of you that don't know, Bruce has designed and produced a hemp car as well. Right, Bruce? Yes. 2 hemp cars. Okay. I always work when I say it.
And Mandy, I might add as well, Gus, I know you're at the University of Michigan. I live about 8 minutes from you.
Awesome.
I have a 10-acre farm. I'd love to invite you out sometime to take a look.
Very cool. Very, very good. Well, thank you very much. Thank you for the intro. I welcome you to come back. I welcome all of you to please come back. Again, I'd love your support with membership, $75 a month. You can join on the website. Other than that, anything else you guys would like to bring up or any other questions before we get started? Or end, I guess.
Oh, I'd just like to thank David Ramey for showing up. He's a good guy. This guy knows his biofuel business as well. And he's the one that provided me with my hemp car with biofuel in 2015. So made from butanol.
Impressive.
Scraps. Hey, David.
Thank you, David.
Where is he? Is he on? David, are you still on? Oh, yes. Maybe. Maybe not. Okay. Well, anyway.
Yeah, I'm here.
Oh.
Yeah, we like Bruce. I could talk about biobutanol for 2 hours, and it's a cat's meow. We can take leaves and spent flowers and stuff like that. It's not the fiber part of the plant that has so many other uses, and make a fuel that goes down, replaces gasoline 100%, and period. You don't have to modify your car at all. And butanol is becoming of age, finally. Nobody has any name recognition for it. It's all ethanol. But butanol, you can make it from the grass in your front yard or anything that grows on the planet Earth. And I'm really looking at trying to do leaves and spent flower, and coming up with a couple of new patents that are really make it economically feasible. So thanks, Bruce, for the shout out.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mandy, for your work too.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I lead. Go ahead.
And one of David's missions as well is to create something that's small enough that agricultural waste can be turned into fuels right there in the location. So a totally distributed type of model, which totally makes sense. I think it's kind of exciting.
I just wanted to make a quick announcement for Win. Number one, I'm not against hempcrete, but I'm just letting us all just realize that, there's a lot more that needs to be done with a lot of these global producers. But we are also very actively involved with the hemp business in Southeast Asia. And it's interesting that the big companies in petrochemical, in bioplastic, even in cement are starting to do more and more tests with hemp, as hemp is now being approved for growth in many places in Southeast Asia. And what they're all coming to the conclusion is that it's going to need to really be in the industrial hemp area. So I just wanted to let you guys know that, and that we're starting with one of the largest corn producers in the region as a rotational crop. And we're actually taking some hemp harvesting equipment that was designed in Colorado, and we're assembling that in Southeast Asia, because hemp needs its own equipment. A lot of people think they can just throw a corn harvester back there and start working with hemp. But I just want you to know that this is something that's growing. But it's interesting that in Southeast Asia, big global 1,000 companies are getting more involved than what I see sometimes here in the U.S.
Yes. Thank you, David.
Well, David, I'll tell you, I'm in discussions with some of the bigger companies that are entering the marketplace, and they are giving us specifications. So I'm definitely dealing with some individuals that are entertaining, but are now showcasing some of their samples. So I've been in NDAs with some Fortune 100 companies on developing a supply chain. So definitely, that was one of the key things is metrics and maintaining measurements. So that's why ASTM, I'm part of the ASTM standards, just developing as much aggregated knowledge to help the industry in its whole. So they are looking.
So we are doing a brands group. I would love to invite anybody that is part of a brand or large scale supply. We have put together a group to help build out the infrastructure and help really answer some of those questions as to what that looks like. And so I haven't set a date yet. I'm trying to peel things off my schedule before I add more things to my schedule. But I think that it is definitely a conversation worth having and worth entertaining where we talk about building this infrastructure, what that looks like. So I'm going to put that out there that I welcome you to invite people to that group, or if you are part of a brand or involved in those discussions, to please reach out. And I'd love to get you involved in that meeting, roundtable discussion. Any other questions? We're at 2 hours now. And so thank you very, very much for staying and getting involved. Let's plan on joining. Please attend next. Please take advantage of the opportunity to connect with each other off of this or until our next meeting. I'm happy to, I guess I should say I'm open to any advice or any suggestions that you have on specific topics that we want to address. Bruce and I will go through, and you as well, we can go through any questions that we've received so we can kind of filter specific topics. But also, if you guys know somebody that belongs at the as a guest presenter or at the head of the discussion table, please make that intro. I would love to highlight what they're doing and really bring some conversation. I recognize I do not know very much about this topic, and so it's hard for me sometimes to guide conversation, where I really encourage you guys who do know the topic to be able to dive in and get to the bottom of it and find out some real numbers and real discussion. So I'll put that out there again. And again, I'd love to have you guys as members of the association, globalhempassociation.org. And then all of our videos, meetings, and notes are available to our members. And then most of our meetings and my interviews are available on our YouTube channel. I just interviewed Richard Rose this morning, which was fun, about the history of hemp. So that will be published again here pretty soon on the YouTube channel. Other than that, I'm going to sign off. Thank you very, very much, Bruce, for everything today. Thank you, Tracy. And anything else before we say goodbye?
Thank you, Mandy.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody, for attending.
Thank you. We had 160 people registered. Okay. Well, thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Good evening.
You're the best, Mandy. You're the best.
Thank you. Thank you.
Amazing. Again.
You get the award. Seriously.
Thank you.
Even though we probably don't have a standardized award for the best in hemp.
Yeah, we're setting the standards.
Exactly. So, make sure that everybody understands that this is the standard.
That's right. That's exactly right. Well,
bye.
Okay, see you.